Pokemon Black and Pokemon White are the most sterile-and Pokemon games I've ever played in my entire life. It is sleep-inducing to play through and it is lackluster in a great deal of areas. This generation is an aesthetically overhauled version of the last, with new Pokemon, items, abilities, and moves, but without all the ingenuity, creativity, and open-ended post-game that made the previous generation a masterpiece of wonder. Technically it has the same innovations and gameplay changes of a fan-made hack, just with a professional paint job and official trademarks. It is the same game, with a small handful of changes and with a gimmick of being restricted to use and fight a whole sea of uncreative and uninspired, bland roster of Pokemon, with no ingenuity employed within. Triple and rotation battles are mild tweaked battle modes that are pushed as grand features, implemented like an afterthought, and can be skipped in the game easily and entirely. The games are devoid of any challenge whatsoever and are literally designed for young children who find the previous games to be too hard. Any kid can blow through the game very easily. The first gym will always use a Pokemon that is super effective to your starter, but going next door from the city will grant you a Pokemon at level 10 that can counter the first gym easily without even having to catch said Pokemon. The third and seventh gyms are extremely hard to lose because you can easily obtain a fire type very easily and early in the game. Halfway through the game you get a lucky egg, which makes the game even more of cinch. And there are also Pokemon you can find that give away abnormally high experience points, which takes all the possible challenge the game has to offer and shoots in the head. And to add the cherry to the sundae, many places have doctors that heal your Pokemon between routes and in dungeons, destroying any challenge whatsoever. This game makes Super Mario World look like I want to be the guy. All the other Pokemon games are easy, but this one takes it to another level and it's extremely insulting. The last bosses are also easy, given that you are forced to have a legendary on your team at the last point in the game. The post-game is an empty void of options on what to do. Pokemon is an open-ended role-playing game series where you train creatures to build a good party to defeat everybody and you're in your way to become the best, as well as going on many adventures. This is a standard fundamental feature that is consistently present in every major Pokemon game and the minor ones as well. It is imperative for open-ended RPG games like Pokemon to have a great, content-rich, varied features, and this is where Pokemon Black and White fails at the most. Everything in Northeastern Unova is lacking. The version-exclusive areas have little to do given that the majority of the features is dealt out in small amounts out of the time by interacting with the opposite version. Undella City is only interesting because Cynthia is there. Otherwise it's small and barren. Glaceon town is the most empty town in all of the Pokemon world. It has absolutely nothing of interest other than that you can somehow get a Gracidea flower in the Pokemon Center unless you count some legend battle that relates to the giant chasm, which is 100 times more interesting than that waste of a town. Other than that, there is barely anything in this game worth mentioning except you can catch a few legendaries in dungeons or whatever. Even the powerful trainers can be defeated easily. By catching a level 70 Volcarona, you can beat Cynthia. The champion Alder can be destroyed easily with Empoleon, Darmanitan, or any other powerful fire-type Pokemon. Oh yeah, and if you want a nice epic celebration after beating the game, you have to beat the Elite Four a second time, unlike in the previous games, where it can be done the first time. The horrible lack of post-game material is not excusable given that the fourth generation and the latter half of the third generation granted us much more in this game. In Emerald, you had the Battle Frontier. In Fire Red and Leaf Green, you had the Civi Islands. In Diamond and Pearl, you had the Battle Zone. In Platinum, you had the Battle Frontier added to the Battle Zone. And in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you had Kanto and Mount Silver from Gold, Silver, and Crystal with added expansions like the Safari Zone, Pokethel and Dome, Embedded Tower, and many more legendaries to catch and interesting things to do as well as the Battle Frontier. Even Pokemon Colosseum and XD had more things to do after the main game. In Colosseum, you can obtain more Shadow Pokemon like the other starters and Togekiss. In XD, there was a Shadow Dragonite, or Colosseum, and a side quest that gave out a lucky egg. Even the Mystery Dungeon games, as well as the Ranger games, had tons of post-game content. There is no excuse why GameFreak gave us this table-scrap minuscule excuse of a post-game content in black and white. If this was 2003 like Ruby and Sapphire, it would have not been so bad, but after so many examples of post-game open and replay value we have received in the previous entries, we expect no less. They could have even increased the badge count to 10 or added another elite. Anything to increase the length of this poor, short, and incredibly easy game. Because of the severe lack of things to do after the game is finished, I often stop playing after the end of the game. Now I'm going to talk about the Pokemon of this generation. These Pokemon are the most uncreative, unoriginal Pokemon I've ever seen. I've seen deviant art artists put out fan-made Pokemon with much more creativity than the horrible lot we have this generation. Some of the creativity of the Pokemon are so uninspired, for example, garbage bags, ice cream cones, candles, a snowflake, chess pieces, cheap dragon with a red head and ears. The starters are the worst in this generation. Snivy looks like Trico and Oshawott looks like Piplup. Rhyperior is a terrible grass type, with high speed, decent defenses, but pitiful offensive stats and a deprived move pool. Its gimmick is the Dream World ability, Contrary, which makes it use Leaf Storm to increase its special attack, which would be good, but it can only use so little outside grass attacks. Samur is a mediocre water-type Pokemon that is outclassed by many other already existing water types. Empoleon is the absolute worst fire-type starter ever. It is the third fire starter that is part fighting, like Glaceon and Infernape. Unlike those, Empoleon is slow and more vulnerable to the many common weaknesses it has. And then there is Patrat. Patrat is the single worst Pokemon GameFreak has ever created. This Pokemon looks like if you took Bidoof and threw it into a toxic waste container. It is extremely repulsive looking and its eyes look really bad. Its evolved form Watchog is not any better with its abysmal stats and piss poor design. Anyone who attacks Generation 4 for their design please explain Patrat and Watchog. They're the absolute worst disgraces of Pokemon ever, by far. There is nothing GameFreak has done that is as bad as those two. GameFreak also has been lazy in the creation of certain Pokemon. Case in point, the elemental monkeys, Pansage and Simisage, Pansear and Simisear, as well as Panper and Simiper. They are all identical in stats and everything with the exception of type and move pool. People criticize 4th generation for adding too many evolutions and use that as GameFreak being uncreative, yet turn a blind eye when they take a 2-stage line and reuse it twice. Not to mention there are so many monkey Pokemon already, Mankey, Primeape, Apom, Ambipom, Chimchar, Monferno, and Infernape. Why do we need 6 more monkeys that are type swaps? What's next to monkey, called Canmeleon and Semimeleon, that are normal type, with color change? Because this is turning into a monkey version of Mortal Kombat with all these type swap monkeys. And speaking of devoid of creativity and being lazy, 3 of the new legendary Pokemon are just 3 acne-ridden men on clouds with different colors and tails. They are known as Tornadus, Thunderous, and Landorus. Aside from Tornadus being the first pure flying type, they are all poorly designed lazy recycled works. Tornadus and Thunderous even have the exact same stats. They even reused concepts from the first generation and made crappy new versions of those. For example, Tympole is a tadpole just like Poliwag, only it evolves into yet another water ground, like we never had those every new generation. And even worse, the final form is an incredibly ugly frog with really bad stats. They also ripped off the idea of 2 counterpart pure fighting types, Throw and Sock, which are very similar to Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan. They could have at least put in secondary typings for Throw and Sock. Corner Cutters. Basculin is a horrible Pokemon that you will very often when surfing similar to Tentacool. Its stats are terrible and it's also very ugly. What a complete fail of a Pokemon. Not to mention, we already have Carvanha. Fungus and Amoongus are so unoriginal in their typing and design, also their names are horrendous. Stunfisk is a really ugly, really terrible ground electric Pokemon that fails at all levels. Its stats are bad and does not evolve into anything useful. Mandibuzz is the absolute worst version exclusive ever. It's really terrible because of bad offense stats and being stealth rock weak. It's also absolutely repulsive to look at. I'd rather use Delibird. Heatmor is a horribly designed Pokemon with bad stats and no ingenuity. And some of the names are so stupid. Timber, Girder, Conkeldurr, Rock'n'Rolla, Unphasant, Zebstrika, Cofagrigus, Audino, Throw, Sock, Thugus, Amogus, Crocodile, Electros, LGM, VEM, Cryogonal, Mienshell, Dredigan, Golurk, Valfolent, Wylouse, and Valcorona. The translation team really was effortless in coming up with these ridiculously sounding names. Half of the event Pokemon are lame. Only Victini and Keldeo are good Pokemon that make you want to collect them, like every event-only Pokemon before them with the exception of Leafeon. Meloetta is just a boringly designed Pokemon with just a hairdo as an alternate form. Genesect is not special at all, compared to Deoxys and Arceus. It's just an ugly purple thing and its typing adds to its own unoriginality as Bug Steel is overused in this generation alone. There are more Pokemon that fail just like those. The majority of the Pokemon are so poorly made it's not even funny. How do people defend all this? The creativity of the new Pokemon is abysmal and the same can be said for their stats. This generation introduces so many rejects and failures, it's not even funny. Why could they make many new evolutions of older Pokemon like they did before? This is one of the key features that made Generation 4 such a masterpiece. Farfetch'd, Delibird, Torkoal, Jinx, Mr. Mime, Noctowl, Dunsparce, among many others, would have needed evolutions. Instead GameFreak decided that Pokemon go a more distant route by having only new Pokemon in a totally separate land. This would have worked if at least 60% were interesting and good, but that is not the case, given how horrible 75% of the Pokemon are. And the region of Unova is the worst region in the Pokemon world. I already talked about how the northeastern part being empty. Accumula Town and Anvil Town are more throwaway towns. Castelia City is a gigantic bore of a city. There are so many parts to it, yet so little to do and it's boring and frustrating to navigate. To battle the gym leader, you first have to go to the gym, then to a specific pier, then a certain building, then to the gym, all while endure 20 minutes of boring dialogue while you press A over and over. There's so many buildings there, but only some can be entered in the game, throwing you completely off. Ixoras City has wild Pokemon, for some reason, in puddles that previously seemed safe to go through. And if you happen to be there when it rains, all the wild Palpitoad are very fast due to their swift swim and running away will be hard to do. What kind of game designer would do this? It's pathetic. The dungeons are poorly designed. Chargestone Cave is very annoying to go through. I never have got so many max repels just to go through one dungeon. You must push crystals in order to progress while you go through tons of trainers and boring dialogue. Also, when your max repels wear out, you also have to contend with annoying Pokemon. Twist Mountain is long, annoying, and confusing. It's tedious and boring by bad dungeon design. I lost so much patience, I set my internal clock to in-game winter month to get out of there, which in turn makes it really easy. Compared to the previous regions, Unova fails, because it's barely even interesting and half the region is a boring mess. Most of the game is filled with boring cutscenes that drag on, which makes you look away and spam A or B until it's over. It happens so much throughout the game and it's even worse if you are replaying the game. This also happens in certain Pokemon games, but less often, as there were less in the way of the gameplay unlike here. Team Plasma is the most forced villain team in all of Pokemon. You will always find Team Plasma all the time throughout the game, especially after every gym you will find Team Plasma. And battling Team Plasma is a boring and repetitive chore, because they always use the weakest Pokemon and they even extend dungeons artificially and make you go through small minor dungeons just so you won't miss them. Having to go through the long way of the Pinwheel Forest to retrieve a fossil Dragonite head that they did not even need, and the Wellspring Cave, for some examples. And the story even makes you backtrack just to find a new area that is also boring and tedious only to find it's pointless, namely the Relic Castle. Also, Team Plasma are never a challenge at all until the very end. It's like fighting the same weak mooks over and over again until the last minute where suddenly they have competent teams. At least Team Galactic had admins with somewhat competent Pokemon and you fought Cyrus a few times. Team Rocket was more threatening than Team Plasma. The gym puzzles are also easy to solve with the exception of the last gym, which is very confusing and tedious.